Animation is an art form with its own unique terminology. Now, much of that can be picked up as you go along, but it's useful to learn a few key terms before we really get started. The first important fact to be aware of is that a single image in animation is called a frame. This is a term which relates to the individual frames of film which are exposed by a traditional movie camera. The rate at which these images are captured and then played back is known as the frame rate. For film, the standard frame rate is 24 frames per second. This means that 24 images are displayed for every second of film. Then, through a process known as persistence of vision, our eyes are able to perceive those individual images as smooth motion. Now, there are different frame rates used within animation for different purposes. The most common are 24 frames per second for film, 25 frames per second for broadcast PAL, and 29.97 frames per second for broadcast NTSC. Other frame rates, such as higher frame rates, can be used for smoother motion within games, and also slow frame rates are often used for simpler styles of animation. For the purpose of this class, we'll be sticking to the 24 frames per second film frame rate. Now, I've briefly mentioned the concept of a character rig already. A character rig is a 3D model with controls added in order to enable it to be moved around very much like a 3D puppet. In fact, it's very similar to the controls that are added to a stop-motion animation puppet, which are in that case known as an armature. And as we start working with characters, you'll hear me talk about poses a lot. This is really the 3D equivalent of what would have been an individual drawing in hand-drawn animation. By moving around the controls within the character rig, we're able to pose our character. One common term within animation which can be quite confusing for new animators is the term key. In hand-drawn animation, a key drawing was one of the most important drawings within the shot. Taken together, all of the key drawings defined the essential elements of a performance and were typically the first drawings to be made. The term is still used within 3D animation for the same purpose, and may be further clarified by talking about key poses or sometimes golden poses. And the reason we actually clarify it slightly further within 3D animation is the fact that within animation software, when you record the position of any control at a point in time, that is known as setting a key. And since you may end up setting keys to define your character's motion on almost every frame, the two terms can become confused. We can clarify things further by using the term keyframe when recording the location of a control, and that helps to distinguish it from our key poses. But in real-world use, you'll often find that both terms are simply abbreviated to just key anyway. Once our key poses have been defined, the next most important drawings or poses are known as our extremes. The extremes define the extremes of the range of motion within a shot, so how high or low something is or how far something travels. Once those extreme poses have been defined, we can then add in breakdowns. And a breakdown is a drawing or a pose that's created between those extreme poses, and it helps to define the path that motion should follow. Finally, once the key poses, the extremes and breakdowns have been defined, the remaining frames within the shot are known as in-betweens. In hand-drawn animation, the animator would create the main drawings for a shot, defining how the character should move between those drawings. And then the in-between drawings were often completed by an assistant, or what was known as an in-betweener. In computer animation, these in-betweens can be created automatically for us, but as you'll find out, it's often better to control those frames manually ourselves, and we'll get a far better result. Now, I know we've covered those key terms very quickly, but don't worry because we'll be coming back to them throughout this class. But it gives you enough information for us to get started and begin discussing the 12 principles of animation in the next lesson.